Vietnam War is synonymous with helicopters. For SOG, they were the critical means of transporting the teams from their base to the ground and bringing them safely home again. 98% of insertions and extractions were by helicopter. In the early years of the war, SOG teams had a relatively easy time of landing and unloading. But as the war progressed, like many things, it became more difficult. The North Vietnamese began monitoring likely areas for helicopter landings.
Therefore, maybe we would rappel in. Maybe we would come in with a short ladder. From a low hovering helicopter, we'd climb down to within 5-8 feet of the ground and jump through some brush onto the ground and still insert.
From the chopper pilot perspective, entering Cambodian or Laotian airspace to insert or extract a SOG team amidst enemy fire was something they took in stride.
You would certainly rather be doing something else when you're getting shot at. But the flying aspect of it, getting our guys in and getting them back out, we kind of had the pleasure of thinking that we're helping make that mission go.
SOG team members knew and appreciated the dangers the pilots faced daily.
These are probably the best guys anywhere, because it's one thing to have somebody shoot at you and you're shooting back at them, but the helicopter pilots are in a glass bubble and they just have to sit there until everybody was loaded in and then get you out.
Once the SOG team came into contact with the enemy and needed extraction, they would call the FAC, who would relay the transport need immediately back to a SOG base.
We got a call from the FAC that we need to do an extract. Nobody waited for anybody else. It was just a timed event. Because a lot of times we were sitting there with no shirts on or anything, sunbathing and who knows what, just killing time. So if we could just take off bare skin, if nothing else, just go.
In almost every case, the choppers arrived amidst a pitched battle, a perfect floating target for the enemy. Helicopter crews and SOG team members were prize captures for the North Vietnamese. And even more NVA teams were created to monitor, track, and neutralize SOG's operations.
I'm not going to tell you that there weren't times that I'd like to have flown the other direction, but we didn't do it, and none of my buds did either.
Often, during an extraction of a SOG recon team, one helicopter would circle the team and fire at the enemy to keep them back, so another helicopter could come in and get the team out.
There's two types of helicopters used. One was called the slip, and it basically was used to transport people. And the other, of course, would be the gunship. In our particular case, we used Charlie model gunships because the Thunder Chickens, our gunships, could actually put fire down within 30 feet in front of them.
We've got to the point where birds are coming back in with 10, 15 bullet holes at them, you know. In fact, we had one of them old H-34 Sikorskis. I think there was 80-some bullet holes across the nose, up through the cabin and out through the transmission case on that bird, and the guy flew it back. But yeah, those birds took a beating. They took a hell of a beating.
When the helicopters couldn't land, they would drop down lines called stable rigs for the SOG members to use. Each chopper could carry 3 SOG members this way. The team rode back to base, dangling under the chopper.
Stable rig it was the toughest. It ain't the carnival ride that you hear about. You've got 100 feet of string coming out of a helicopter, and you're trying to hook up into this rig, and you got to make sure as a team leader that everybody else is hooked up too. This is like a parachute harness that you hook up.
Sometimes, even when the SOG team was on board or attached, and the choppers were up and moving away from the LZs, safety was still not in sight. One time, Bill Deasy was climbing up a rope ladder trying to leave a hot LZ.
I would say I was halfway up the ladder and the chopper started to rise and lift off. You could see he wanted to take off. Unfortunately, when I was starting to snap like in, I heard a loud boom, and immediately the chopper started twisting, doing 360s and just flailing all over the place. My own thought was, as I was holding onto the ladder and being swung around, was to immediately get out from underneath the choppers. I knew this thing's coming down. You can't be underneath it when it hits. slammed me on my right side. It fractured my skull and knocked all my right teeth out, screwed up my spine, and I aroused to tremendous heat, and I could feel it mostly on my left side. I tried to get out and move, but I was entangled in the rope ladder, but my legs were caught underneath the one part of the chop, I'm not sure which.
Two soldiers made an attempt to drag DC away from the helicopter, but the intense flames forced them back.
One of the fellas said, we're going to have to shoot him. And I think the intent, as somebody at once mentioned to me, was to, pull a bullet in my head rather than let me burn to death. But one or two of the fellas said, let's try one more time. And they came down and they entangled my legs, and then they started moving away quickly because it was very hot. But I remember crawling away from the chopper.
Amazingly, DC hadn't made it to safety yet. Another helicopter arrived to bring the SOG team and chopper crews back to safety. But there weren't enough stable rigs for everyone. They told DC to hold on to another soldier.
I just put my arms around his neck and straddled him, wrapped my legs around his hips, and I was going to come out like that. I was losing blood, and I started slipping down his body. I was losing my strength. And I think my head was down by his belly button or his abdomen, and I just said to him, I said, please don't drop me.
Miraculously, the chopper made it back, the soldier still holding on to DC. After 2 weeks in the hospital, SOG man Bill DC was back in action, running recon with his team. The longer the war went on, the more sophisticated tactics became on both sides. Because of the location of the Ho Chi Minh Trail and the extensive knowledge of the terrain gained by the North Vietnamese, most of SOG's landing zones were mapped and constantly watched by the enemy. It was time to try something new.